So if Trump wants to be a gangster and bully and said, I'm going to take your money if you win, doesn't he realize that when people straighten their backs up and have a spine and respond to his bully activity?
Abby Phillip of CNN had Anna Kasparian and Dr. Cornel West on to talk about Zoran Mamdani, as well as the threats that Donald Trump is making against Mamdani. Why don't we take a look at these clips from Abby Phillip's CNN show with Cornel West and Anna Kasparian. I will have my opinions to add, and then I want to know what you think in the comments, but let's check it out.
Tonight, Zoran Mamdani fires back at President Trump's threats to New York City funding. Over the weekend, Trump said Mamdani's campaign to be mayor will prove to be, quote, one of the best things to ever happen to our great Republican Party. He added that Mamdani, quote, needs the money from me as president in order to fulfill all of his fake communist promises. He won't be getting any of it, so what's the point of voting for him? Well, CNN's Aaron Burnett spoke to Mamdani about that threat tonight. Here's what he said.
So the number this year from the federal government was $7.4 billion to New York City. Are you okay if New York City loses that?
No, we will fight for every single dollar that the city currently receives from the federal government. And I look for examples across this country that showcase the best way to respond to Donald Trump's strengths is not collaboration, is his threats rather. It's responding with strength. And what we see in California is an attorney general of the state has estimated that for every dollar they spent on lawsuits against the federal government's threats to withhold funding, they won more than $30,000 in what would otherwise have been lost. And so we will take that same approach.
The paradox, of course, of Trump's post and also of his behavior in this whole situation is that he says this is so good for Republicans, and yet he seems to be willing to do almost anything to get Mamdani out of this race. It's too late now, more than likely, but why? Why is he playing both sides of this?
Abby, I think you're going to see more fireworks. I mean, Trump has a lot going for him in this particular case, just as Republicans have pointed to other Democrat politicians in the past and try to make them individuals that they identify with certain brands of the Democrat Party. And in this case, Mamdani has identified himself as a democratic socialist, or as conservatives would say, a communist. And so why wouldn't they play up some of the policy proposals and the cost of those and what it would mean in terms of the implications for the residents of New York City were he to be elected? And yes, you're going to see
more.
But
on what basis would Trump withhold $7.4 billion from New York?
Well, we know Congress controls the purse strings, so there's a lot that, that he would have to...
He's going to really say, New Yorkers, you exercised your right to vote. We're going to take your tax dollars away from you.
Except New Yorkers spent almost 18% of GDP on federal taxes. I'm talking about New York City taxpayers, 18% of their GDP last year on paying federal taxes. The idea that the president is going to retaliate against local leaders just because he doesn't like their politics and withhold money that they're entitled to is ridiculous to me. And honestly, it sets up a really, really bad precedent. I would be disgusted if Biden did something like that. It disgusts me that Trump is threatening to do it just because he doesn't like Mamdani, doesn't like his politics, and wants to go against the will of voters in New York City.
Well, there's 2 points, if I can, that I want to make here. One is New York is the beating heart of the Democratic Party right now. One, you have a socialist, self-described socialist, that is not a pejorative, he says it himself, who's running for mayor of New York City. And you have Chuck Schumer, who is driving us towards a government shutdown because he's worried about a primary challenge from AOC. It is incredibly New York-centric, and it's the battle taking place in the Democratic Party.
True.
The second point is the former governor of Indiana, Mitch Daniels. I was at this event back in 2009 in my home county, Lake County, Indiana, which has had a troubled past. It's where Gary is located. But people were complaining about all the corruption and the grift that was happening there and asking him for help. And he said, quote, I believe in home rule and you're entitled to all the lousy, clumsy, graft-ridden government you're willing to pay for.
The whole idea of a president being able to withhold federal funds like this because he doesn't like or for partisan reasons, just add it to the huge pile. It's completely unconstitutional and flagrantly illegal. And he's gotten away with it to such a degree so far that I think he's just convinced that it's all fine. When the other guy was talking, he sort of slipped in there, Mamdani calls himself a socialist. Some Republicans will say communist, as though that's a legitimate well, people will have different opinions about what he is. And there's this constant fabric of sane washing, and he's not a communist any more than Bernie Sanders is a communist. They use the term democratic socialist very carefully. And what all of this ignores is that why we're even talking about Zoran Mamdani is that he won the Democratic primary in New York City by what is a truly shocking margin. And if you watch footage of Mamdani, one of the reasons that I think he's so appealing, that when you ask Zoran Mamdani a question, he answers it. Mamdani is a guy that doesn't dodge a question. He answers it in a very straightforward way, and he tells you what his policy is going to be, and then you are free to disagree with that policy. But when you go, hey, what are you going to do about this? He tells you, and you go, oh, okay. And you turn to one of his opponents and you go, what are you going to do about this? And then you get the song and dance. You get well, you have to remember that when Hillary Clinton, 10 years ago, don't pay attention where my other hand's going, skibbity-bop, wallet's $10 lighter. And that's what we've come. It's so frustrating that I think that Mamdani's biggest selling point is that he will tell you what he intends to do.
Right now,
Fair
you're
enough.
entitled to all the socialism you're willing to vote for.
Fair enough.
Well, I'll tell you
there's
this,
also
though,
a
man.
big
I'm glad that
question.
you even described the Democratic Party having a heart, because it seems to me they've been so spineless.
I'm feeling nice tonight.
You're very, very kind.
Well, Dr.
But I would
West,
say
let me,
this,
let
though.
me ask you this, because
Yes.
it's to you, perhaps to the point that you're going to make here. But the Democratic Party, it's a big question. What should they do with Mamdani? And in the New York Times, there was an argument that they should embrace the eat the rich populism, a scorching economic message delivered by political outsiders standing up to the powerful. The villains in this narrative are the elites at the top of the broken system. Do you think that that's right? The Democrats should just forget about the labels and just embrace the economic populism?
Oh, and it is a populism. It's not a socialism. Mamdani's not a socialist at all. This is New Deal liberalism, New Deal social democratic policies. And New York is not just the center of what you're saying to be the Democratic Party. It's the center of the national and international capitalist order. So if Trump wants to be a gangster and bully and said, I'm going to take your money if you win, doesn't he realize that when people straighten their backs up and have a spine and respond to his bully activity, if New York wanted to boycott the federal government as a city, the government would go down too. And there's an identity in New York that cuts across class. Brooklyn, boogie down Bronx, I live in Harlem. New York would be able to come together. So all this talk about socialism, that's just abstract so-and-so. Brother Zoran is a liberal, he's a social democrat, he's no revolutionary at all.
I actually agree with your take on that. And honestly, I think Mamdani represents the class-based politics that Trump pretended to be about and ran on both in 2016 and 2024.
And Brother
but
Bernie,
didn't deliver.
Ran on it too.
He did.
And many of us were with him, but
Exactly.
he was unable to succeed at that level. But thank God the brothers Zoran, Kwame, Mamdani doing his thing.
I'll give you this much. I do think he's tapped into the issues that particularly young people care about. I mean, they can't afford housing in this country because the price is so high and interest rates are, at historic levels, and all of these challenges that they're encountering as they enter the world. The problem is that the policies that he's pursuing are not going to make things any better for them. And we know this because we can look at 4 years of Joe Biden and the spending spree that the federal government went on and what that meant for the cost of living and inflation in this country.
I think Joe Biden and Mamdani are very different. Joe Biden was all about public-private partnerships. For instance, like the infrastructure bill, which, Democrats love to talk about, love that it happened, but it really privatizes a ton of public infrastructure. There's a lot of corporate giveaways in there. Mamdani comes from a different school of thought.
I think that Dr. West's take that Mamdani is less a socialist and more a New Deal Democrat actually makes a lot of sense. I think that's a great point. And I think that people are hungry for it, right? I don't sense that America hungers to be some sort of a communist model where the wealth is distributed evenly. It doesn't work. Nobody's interested in that. We understand that there are going to be rich people in this country, and there's probably always going to be some portion of the country that are the have-nots as well. And I think most people imagine a wealth distribution kind of chart looking like a big bell curve, where down at the left-hand end, you have some have-nots that are really struggling, whether because of mental health issues or whatever. And then up at the right-hand end, you've got a handful of, captains of industry and the wealthy who have inherited it and grown generational wealth. But in the middle is this sort of big slope, big, hill of the middle class. And that is, ironically, when people say, let's make America great again, I think good faith people imagine a post-war era in the 50s and 60s when we were taxing the top bracket at almost 90%. And we had that big, thriving middle class. Now, 2025 is very, very different than 1955, right? There's all different kinds of factors at play here that we can't just snap our fingers and go back to that. But in terms of the model of imagining most of the people in America being able to get by without having to worry about a single health crisis, about worrying about hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars of student debt you're never going to get out from under, that they don't need to constantly go to sleep at night with this sour pit in their stomach because of not having enough money to just make ends meet. You can look this up on the internet. The actual wealth disparity of this country is broken on its face. You don't need to be an economist or have any understand to see that the tiny percentage of people at the right end of the chart that have literally all of the money and leaving all the rest of us down feeling like we're, fighting each other for the scraps. It's fundamentally broken, and I think you feel that nowhere as acutely as in New York City. So people in New York City just want to be able to afford to live in the city they call their home. And Mamdani is a guy that comes along putting forward concrete plans to try and fix it. Now, maybe that guy that looks like, a living marionette is right, and that these policies aren't going to work. I don't think that him pinning it to Biden somehow. Anna Kasparian makes a great point. Zoran Mamdani is not Joe Biden. And while the right loves to paint Biden and the Biden administration as this bleeding left edge of it, absolutely not, right? Joe Biden has been a centrist his entire career. The headline for me is that Americans and Democrats in particular seem sort of sick of the Chuck Schumers and the Nancy Pelosi's and the kind of double talk and the finger wagging and the look, we need to get in there and make it better again, but things aren't getting better, right? So we feel like we've been promised this change that hasn't materialized again and again and again. And they're ready to try something new. Anywho, yep, let me know what you think in the comments. How do you feel about Zoran Mamdani?